Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Alex Bell, host of To The Point. Over the next half hour, we're taking a closer look at California's high-speed rail project, hearing from elected leaders and experts about this mega project. Now, California has a long plan to build a high-speed rail from the Bay Area to Los Angeles with the goal of transporting people across the state in under 3 hours. Now, voters approved the project funding back in 2008. But tonight, as the project continues to face challenges with costs and timelines, lawmakers are questioning its future. ABC 10's Jeannie Nguyen takes us to the Central Valley, where high-speed rail construction is currently underway.
We're at the Hanford Viaduct, which is our longest structure actually for the Central Valley. 6,300-foot structure, and it connects into our future high-speed rail Kings Tulare Regional Station.
It's a vision decades in the making. California's controversial high-speed rail project will eventually connect Northern and Southern California and has first brought a new era to the Central Valley. It's where the High-Speed Rail Authority is currently constructing track for the bullet train.
So we started this structure in 2020. This is our longest structure for the Central Valley.
This is the Hanford Viaduct, about an hour south of Fresno. High-speed rail officials have a goal of completing this portion and all of construction in the Central Valley by 2026, because eventually this will be an important part of their test track.
We have to test and do dynamic testing for at least 2 or 3 years before we can start any operations. That's to test for our rolling stock, our track and systems, all of the different maintenance of way facilities that we'll have throughout the valley. All of those things, communications, dispatch, all of the things that you need for an operational train system.
But all of this progress comes with a hefty price tag and plenty of criticism. High-speed rail officials say the entire project from San Francisco to Los Angeles was supposed to be done by 2020 and cost $45 billion. But the estimated completion date to finish just the Central Valley portion is in the early 2030s and is estimated to be between $30 and $33 billion to connect Bakersfield and Merced. Tony Tinoco, High-Speed Rail's Central Valley Deputy Regional Director, tells ABC 10, while there have been difficulties, there is progress.
Out of the number of structures that we've started, more than 50 of those have been completed. We've actually created more than 15,000 construction jobs.
In 2023, Governor Gavin Newsom appointed an Inspector General for the High-Speed Rail Authority. His most recent audits finds the High-Speed Rail has reported the project is unlikely to finish on time and is facing a budget shortfall.
What is your response, to the criticism that the Inspector General has found on the high-speed rail project?
We always look forward to being, partners with the Inspector General. Any other federal and state audits that we've completed, we welcome the opportunity to work with those entities to make sure that we're being transparent.
The project has faced many delays, including lawsuits, while in the process of getting environmentally cleared. In a 2024 business plan report, High-Speed Rail says it has faced 4 lawsuits relating to the California Environmental Quality Act, which has contributed to impacting the cost of the project.
It's been no secret that we don't have all of the funding to build this. We've been trying to build as much as possible and as fast as possible with the limited funding that we do have in hand.
California Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley has been an open critic of the project. He's proposed a bill calling for the federal government to stop funding the project.
California's federal transportation dollars should go where it's really needed, towards improving the quality of our roads, alleviating traffic, making our roads safer, or even for regional rail lines that people actually are riding on and could use a lot of help.
What is the plan if federal funding is cut from the high-speed rail?
Majority of the funding that we have is from the state. Progress is real. There's no doubt that the structures are being built, construction is ongoing, and impacts are being made.
Here's what funding for the high-speed rail project looks like. In a 2025 project update, since 2009, more than $6.8 billion in federal funding has been committed to this project. That makes up 23% of the funds, while the state has committed to $22.5 billion, or 77% of the funds. The High-Speed Rail Authority also gets 25% of its funding from the state's cap and trade program, designed to limit emissions by creating a market for tradable emissions credits. That funding varies from year to year and could be on the chopping block in years to come. Democratic Senator Dave Cortese has consistently supported the project and has recently authored SB 545. He says $7 billion needs to be acquired by next summer in order for this project to continue. He's waiting for more information from high-speed rail officials before a decision is made on how to go about securing those funds.
I think it'll prove that the investment's worth it, but it'll also show us that we can close the gap on funding. The state already has many tools that it provides local governments and developers to use, to pay for infrastructure.
Senator Cortese urges Californians to start seeing the project as a stimulus package that will eventually create an economic boost. But the big question remains.
Original plan is from San Francisco to the LA area. When do you think we might see that?
It's all dependent on funding. So it's hard to give a timeline when you don't have all of those dollars in hand.
In Kings County, Jeannie Nguyen, ABC 10.
All right, Jeannie, so I do have a question to ask you because we know that the High Speed Rail Authority CEO, he spoke at Fresno City College, and he had some, updates about some of the issues the project has been facing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Alex, the authority CEO, Ian Chowdhury, says 119 miles of rail are under construction, with 50% of that now complete. And he did acknowledge the ongoing challenges and setbacks the project has had, especially now that the federal government is threatening to cut off funding. He said the authority is committed to finding additional funds.
77% of the money that is spent on this project came from California taxpayers. We do want to continue to look for opportunities to work with the federal government and continue to secure more funding.
As we mentioned in our reporting, $7 billion needs to be made available by next summer for this project to continue. I spoke with Democratic Senator Dave Cortese, the Senate Transportation Committee chair, about his next steps.
We have an actual bill, SB 545, which is an economic analysis, but is a very aggressive one, something that's never been done on high-speed rail. And the economic analysis is up and down the entire corridor, really Los Angeles to San Francisco. We want the first draft of the study to come back a year from now. This isn't a long-term 5-year study. It's something that we need to get numbers back on now, and there's reasons for that, because decisions are going to be made as to whether to continue to put cap and trade money into high-speed rail, as to whether or not we have a legitimate argument to the federal government that they should keep entering into agreements with us on high-speed rail.
There was a state assembly transportation hearing. Somebody from the LAO basically said that we need $7 billion by next summer. What's going to happen if we don't get that money?
The High-Speed Rail Authority actually has to make a very specific annual report to my committee. We hope to have that hearing set by May, and we're going to find out. But it could be that there's delays on that Central Valley piece, until that next $7 billion is secured. It would be great if the federal government came through with $4 or $5 billion of that like we were expecting, but if not, that may slow things down. The real tragedy of that now is there's 31 job sites open as we speak. There's there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 jobs, as we understand, right now, ongoing. So every time you have a delay in capital money, in investment money like that, it's usually somebody's paycheck that's going to get hit.
We actually took a trip to the Hanford Viaduct a couple weeks ago, and high-speed rail officials down there told us their goal is to finish all of that entire corridor by 2026, because eventually they want to use the Hanford Viaduct to be a testing track. Do you have faith that we're able to meet that timeline?
Based on the current funding sources they have, honestly, I'm not going to find out until we have this next hearing. But it's a great question. It's a question we're going to have to ask, and they're going to need to be very specific with their responses to the public on the promises that we make. And I think that's been a problem politically in California the last few years. People talk about cost of living and all kinds of other issues that are bothering taxpayers and voters in California right now. I think what's really bothering them is they want to make sure they're getting their money's worth. If we're putting money in, we say we're going to open up a year from now, we need to do that. Just like major cities that have been built, Los Angeles, San Jose, Silicon Valley, San Diego, there were no magic dollars from the federal government. The cities made their deals with developers to create the infrastructure they needed, and some of it took time, but it got done.
What's your last message to the naysayers, especially people in your district too, who may feel like, I grew up in your district, right? And since a kid, I've heard about high-speed rail. For people who are just like you were saying, feel like they're not getting their money's worth, literally cannot physically see how this can happen in their lifetime, what do you have to say for those people?
What I would say to them is stop looking at this project as just a rail project and start looking at it as the largest economic development project in the history of the state. That when you start putting high-speed rail through these communities, it spawns major economic development. It doesn't just create construction jobs, it creates commerce, it creates commercial development, it creates shopping centers, it creates office space, it creates housing, it creates synergy with the institutions of higher education. We've seen that with Stanford, with Cal, with San Jose State, in Silicon Valley. Taxpayers didn't pay for the Highway 101 interchanges entirely themselves that exist in my district. In many cases, those were contributed to by developers who wanted to build more housing, but knew that they had to meet the traffic congestion problems. They had to remedy those, they had to cure those. And that's the dance that has to be done here on high-speed rail. But back to your base question, we've always looked at this as a rail project almost in isolation, as if the Central Valley is always going to look the same as it does now, and there's just going to suddenly be this 220-mile-an-hour train. And I think that's been some of the criticism. Why do you even need a 220-mile-an-hour train, in Merced or in Fresno? But I would ask taxpayers, residents of California, to start thinking of it as a stimulus package that's going to generate. The rail itself is going to create cause for major development around it. People have seen that in their local communities. They've seen it with LA Metro, they've seen it with the BART project, they'll see more of that. Anytime the government goes in and makes these investments and does them in the right places at the right time, it spawns economic development.
I also spoke with Republican Senator Tony Strickland, who is the vice chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. He tells me he believes if we do come up with that money, it'll be a waste to spend it on this project. So we've heard that we need $7 billion by next summer for the high-speed rail project. Where do you think we're going to get that money, and how will this process work?
Well, my dad always told me, if you dig a hole for yourself, the best way to get out of that hole is to stop digging. And that's what we're doing here in California. At the end of the day, we now are asked $7 billion to keep a project going that was sold to the people of California at $9.9 billion. And the project was already supposed to be done, and the project was supposed to go from San Francisco to Los Angeles. I said at the time, when there was my last vote in the state Senate 12, 13 years ago, and I said, we don't have the funds for this. And everybody in the legislature knows it's pie in the sky money, and saying we're going to get all this money from the federal government, knowing full well we're not going to get that money from the federal government. So I look at this project as a waste of billions of dollars. We've already wasted $13 billion and have really nothing to show for it.
So just to reiterate, you don't think we'll be getting that $7 billion?
Let me go out on a limb. Maybe we'll end up wasting the $7 billion. I could think of other ways that we can spend $7 billion more efficiently, especially when we have a budget deficit. Every group that comes here is like, these are important programs. And we're actually saying, no, we'll just keep digging that hole on the high-speed rail and spend $7 billion here, knowing full well, I want to go on a limb and say this project, as proposed, will never be built.
If the state doesn't secure the $7 billion, what do you think will happen to construction? Will construction stop?
Well, I'm not an expert at that end, but that's what I'm told, and that's what we're told by the folks from the high-speed rail, that they absolutely need the $7 billion in order to keep this project moving. And I will also say, they also told us this project had already been done, and it would have been done going from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And so I don't think they have a lot of credibility with the people of California on what they say that they're going to get done. And again, I believe if we spend that $7 billion, that $7 billion will be wasted. And that's an important $7 billion that could be spent on a lot of other programs.
This project is heavily dependent on state funding, as a lot of the lawmakers have said. With California facing a severe budget deficit, who picks up the slack, and do you think privatization is on the table?
Well, when it first was proposed, I asked about privatization, a public-private partnership. There isn't a private company that would touch this with a high 10-foot pole. Look at the mismanagement that's already happened. The billions, we've already wasted $13 billion and have nothing to show for it. If you're an investor, are you going to invest in this project? The answer is absolutely not. We should have had more foresight before we started this and know, could we have done public-private partnerships? I'm not against a train. I'm just saying that the people who proposed this did not have the foresight to do it right. And that's what also is bad about this high-speed rail. We as California should think about big projects and get things done and move people from one end to another of the state. For example, there's a train going from Las Vegas to Rancho Cucamonga to Orange County. They had the foresight to get private investment into that project. We should be able to, one, say how much is this train going to cost? So if people are going to go from San Francisco to LA, I've asked this many, many times when it was first proposed, today, how much is that ticket going to cost? And by the way, is it really high speed? Why would they take the rail instead of flying? High-speed rail is not really high speed. We have 13 stops.
If funding dries up, what happens to the progress that has already been made, and what will happen to the jobs that are at risk?
I think there hasn't been much progress just in general. So to say progress has been made, I don't think there has been progress made. That's number one. Number two, I would say for those union workers and for those workers who are on this project, you know, there's other ways we could spend $100 billion. Again, I'm not against infrastructure spending. I think we have a water system here. We need more surface storage. I think we have a highway system that needs more help. We have a crumbling infrastructure in California. We have, you know, wire lines that we need to put underground to prevent fires. There's many of the things we need to invest in the infrastructure of California that are more worthy to everyday California residents than this train that we all know. I believe everybody in this legislature knows that this project, as proposed, is not going to be built.
And I just want to follow up to that, because you said you don't believe progress has been made, but you know, with the active sites that have already had, you know, structures being put up, I guess, what do you think should happen to that? Should we just abandon those and just have whatever's been built just stay there? Repurpose that material? What do you think?
Well, I would repurpose that material and realize, again, as my father always told me, we dug a hole for ourselves. And I believe we've wasted $13 billion. We could repurpose the materials, but there's other things that we could do. And we're talking about finishing this is over $100 billion. There's a lot of things that we can fund with $100 billion and that we could be more efficient, that are better for the people of California.
So the FBI recently just agreed to Congressman Kevin Kiley's request for an investigation into the high-speed rail project. Do you think this could slow down the project even more? And how serious of a disruption do you think this could be? And also, do you welcome this investigation?
We're taking dollars out of hardworking California families. Many families across the state are having to decide between a gallon of milk and a gallon of gas. They're living paycheck to paycheck. One of the proposals I had is take the money away from the high-speed rail and put it to lowering our gas tax. You know, motorists right now going across the state of California are having a hard time deciding between a gallon of milk and a gallon of gas. We've increased our gas prices now 3 years in a row, and people can't afford it. And so I would rather that we put money back into people's pocket and make sure that they can make it paycheck to paycheck. And there's many other things we can spend that are more worthy than what's being spent today on the high-speed rail. And it's unfortunate because we're taking money out of hardworking California families just trying to make ends meet at a time where more people are leaving the state of California than coming in for the first time since the gold rush. And it's because, you know, things are more expensive here. We have an oasis. We live in the best weather in the world. And it's the first time in California history when more people are leaving than coming in. And we need to be able to help those citizens. And I think there's much better ways we can spend money that really help all Californians.
And Alex, a funding update is expected in May's Senate Transportation Committee meeting.
All right, Jeannie, thank you so much for the update. Make sure you stay with us because after the break, how California's high-speed rail project stacks up to other projects underway in the United States. As we take a closer look at the growing push for high-speed rail in the U.S., one group is helping lay the tracks literally and politically. The U.S. High-Speed Rail Association has been pushing since 2009 for a big investment in faster, greener rail systems across the country. The nonprofit is bringing together industry powerhouses and public leaders with one goal: to get high-speed trains moving and transform how we travel. Joining us now is President and CEO Andy Kunz, who says that we're seeing more momentum than ever before with high-speed rail projects, and California is leading the way. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. My first question, from your perspective, how does California's high-speed rail project compare to similar efforts in other states or countries? I mean, is it ahead of its time or is it falling behind?
Oh, it's way ahead of its time. They're building the state of the world. I mean, 220-mile-an-hour speeds is the standards they're building to. That's faster than the whole Japanese system, faster than most of the European system, and faster than most of the Chinese system. It's an enormously complex project, probably the most complex in the United States. When you think about the size of California and the difficulty of the terrain, but they're going to get it done, and it'll be probably the busiest system in the United States. Once the San Fran and LA are fully connected, we think it's going to be one of the busiest rail lines in the world, probably comparable to London Paris high speed line.
What are the biggest barriers to implementing high-speed rail in the U.S. right now? Is it funding, political will, infrastructure, or something else?
I would say funding and political will are the two number one issues, and obviously the political will leads to the funding. So, um, but that's changing a lot. I mean, the fact that we have all these projects taking shape, and we've got private sector, big players getting involved and investing, we're really on the tip of a whole new realm of focusing on this in this country.
Compared to other countries, why has the U.S. struggled to get high-speed rail off the ground?
Well, we've just never made it a priority. We've spent $2 trillion building highways. We've spent almost $1 trillion building, advanced aviation system, and we've spent to date probably not even 10 billion on high-speed rail. So, you get what you pay for and what you focus on. So I think that's the issue.
With states like California, for example, facing a significant budget deficit, what options are really available for sustainable funding for high-speed rail?
The new CEO of the authority is very business focused, and he's working on a big plan to get stable funding. See, right now they get funded by the cap and trade, but that fluctuates a little bit each year depending on the sales and all that, and that's hard to bond against because it fluctuates. So by getting it solidified at a certain amount, they can go and bond against that and get 5 times more money from the private sector. And there's a lot of private sector money that's interested right now. They're already like investing in several of these, and they're looking for more to invest in, like Global Infrastructure Partners, Fortress Investments. These are big Wall Street firms that are already pouring billions of dollars into these systems. So they're looking to do that more, bond money and then Wall Street money. And so it becomes a public-private partnership at that point, and that's really what we're seeing the future is going to be. Is there's a lot of money ready to invest in this, and so we don't need it all to be public money. It can certainly be a lot of private money.
If the California project fails or stalls significantly, what kind of ripple effect could that have on national momentum?
I mean, it would certainly affect the national opinion. It sort of already has, just because, a lot of the critics like to call it out and all that. But in the end, it's not going to fail. It's going to get built. It's just how soon can we get trains up and running? So steady funding is probably the key thing that's going to really accelerate that project.
Do you believe California's high-speed rail could serve as a model or a warning for future high-speed rail projects across the country?
I think it would definitely serve as a model, because they're having to figure out a lot of these things. We're new at this as a nation, so we didn't have a lot of expertise in this area. We didn't have a lot of people that really knew how to do this. And so California is literally working out a lot of these early issues, even setting up programs, training a future workforce and things like that. They're doing a great model in how to build it as sustainably as possible. They have all kinds of really strict requirements on, even like the bulldozers and things that are out there working all have to be like specially cleaner equipment, new generation construction equipment that's much less polluting. They set the standard for recycling materials, and they're even setting the standard for it's going to be fully solar powered, which is really revolutionary.
And is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to mention or that you think people should consider when they talk about, high-speed rail?
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of really great benefits that this will bring to our society. And I think a lot of people are not understanding or realizing it yet. They hear us talk about it, but it doesn't really gel. Like for example, we have some major issues with affordable housing, for example, and high-speed rail is probably the single largest affordable housing solution without building a single house. And people are like, what? And it's like, because the train can connect you to a whole town that's already exists, that's already affordable, but it's too far away from the job centers to reasonably commute by car. But on a train going 200 miles an hour, you could get there in 20 minutes. A whole new boom in tourism and travel, just because it's this whole new option that you can get places quickly. So you can go for day trips to concerts and festivals and things that would normally be not even reasonable. Like someone in San Francisco could go to Los Angeles for a football game or a concert or something by train, and then have dinner and go take the train back home. And it'll create a boom in US manufacturing as well, which means a whole bunch of new jobs and building all these things here in America. The tourism boom that it create, that will create more jobs in tourism. The construction boom will create more jobs in the construction field. And so this is going to have this domino effect across probably 5 or 6 different big areas of our country. There's all those kinds of things that we've seen them happen in other countries, and we tell the story, but it's really hard for Americans to understand it until they see it.
Andy, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And thank you so much for watching and for inviting us into your home. If you have something that you think we should be looking into, you already know you can reach out to me and the team anytime at tothepoint@abc10.com. And our content does not end here. You can always stream our ABC 10 Plus TV app for free.